Good evening, everybody. Hell's Unicorn here once again. And tonight I just wanted to have a brief little talk about the subject of cults. Now, as many of you may know, I am a person of faith. I'm a person who doesn't really talk about my faith much on this channel because I view this as more of a political channel, but the truth is that every now and then faith and politics will mix, and they will mix in ways that are so obvious and so blatant that you cannot help but not avoid talking about them. Let's just put it that way. And I wanted to devote my attention this evening specifically to the person in Dr. James David Manning. He is the man who runs Atlah Ministries. It is a independent church situated in Harlem, and he has been a very vocal critic of Barack Hussein Obama, the current president of the United States. He is an active member of the birther movement, and he is a self-avowed defender of the United States Constitution. Now, these attributes originally attracted me to his YouTube channel, where I essentially proceeded to be a subscriber of his for the better part of the past year, and I've watched his videos fairly regularly, in which he has taken the occasion to rip into a lot of people that I don't like, particularly Barack Obama, most of the Democratic establishment, most of the elite in the Republican establishment, Glenn Beck, Sarah Palin, and a host of other people associated with Fox News that I don't like. However, in recent weeks, he has also attacked a lot of people that are involved in the liberty movement, particularly the Paul family and recently Rand Paul, and also members of the broader liberty movement that are attempting to push for smaller government. And this leads me to question, what is this guy really all about? Because I came to the realization, I don't really know much about this guy. This guy gives a lot of Baptist-like sermons where he basically whips himself into a raging frenzy, shouts to high heavens, and basically does the traditional black preacher persona, which is, shout loud, talk to people as if he's channeling the spirit of the Almighty, and doing so from a rather impressive pulpit. Now, I decided to visit his website, Atlah Ministries, and I took note of the fact that Mr. Manning's church is a church of Sabbath worshipers, or Seventh-day Adventists, as it were. Now, being somebody who is of the classical Christian persuasion, somebody who is a Bible believer, who is a tradition believer, and who believes Christianity to be a real historic religion, I naturally have a host of problems with this practice. It is essentially a form of Judaizing, and it was denounced by the Catholic Church before the Catholic Church started engaging, and I'm talking about the Roman Catholic Church here, started engaging in similar acts of Judaizing by restructuring the Mass to more closely resemble the old temple worship of pre-Christianity. The pre-Christian era of Judaism, there was a sacrifice brought to the Mass at the temple, in which animals were sacrificed as a type and shadow of the coming sacrifice of Christ and the resulting atonement. Essentially, what the Roman Catholic Church did was they decided to bring back the concept of the sacrifice in the new Mass. This was during the medieval era, probably sometime circa the 11th or 12th century, and this brought up a lot of questions as to whether or not the atonement of Christ was full and final, or if it needed to be divided out amongst the people by the church in a sacramental fashion. And this was my primary reason for breaking with Rome and basically becoming an independent Christian myself, specifically a Jansenist, one who still follows the Catholic tradition, but naturally is not in communion with Rome. Now, upon closer inspection, I noticed that the mode of church government and the reasoning behind the Atlah view of history is very similar to Roman Catholicism. They have a view of the succession from the seat of St. Peter that is almost a mirror image of popery and of the Vatican view of apostolic succession, which I also differ on. And they are essentially a church that stakes their claim by denouncing all other churches that are not in good standing with the Roman Church. I've provided a link in the description here to a list compiled by Dr. Manning. It's called the False Prophet Report, and it lists nearly every single church in existence. All of them, every denomination, with the exceptions of the Roman Catholic Church, the Antiochian and Greek Orthodox churches, which are recognized as valid churches by Rome, and it also essentially recognizes a form of real Seventh-day Adventist Pentecostalism, which I have long believed to be associated with the Pentecostal Old Catholic Church, which is a very suspect denomination that is probably still tied in with Rome. And I've basically decided to attach all of the links. I've attached this one. I've also attached one that deals with the fallacies, scriptural fallacies, that are to be found in Sabbath worshipers. And I also provided a link to a forum where people basically disseminate some of the finer points of this report on false prophets, and they give their piece on the matter. Now, I do happen to agree with some of the false prophets that are pointed out here, particularly these double-dealing evangelical types that are basically making themselves millionaires off of the tithings of impressionable people who get taken in by their mojo, so to speak. But there are a lot of churches with very valid doctrines that are denounced here, and no real reason is given for them apart from the fact that they disagree with other denominations that also came out of the broader mainline Protestant Reformed movement. And like I said before, in this lengthy, extensive list of churches, no mention whatsoever of the Roman Catholic Church. It's not mentioned anywhere in any of Pastor Manning's disseminations anywhere on his website, as far as I can tell, and I've gone through most of it. So, for those of you out there who are just now discovering Pastor Manning, be wary, because this guy definitely looks like bad news. And for those of you that have been following him and have recently been a bit puzzled by his recent attacks on Rand Paul and his constantly bringing up that Aqua Buddha thing, which was debunked, I have a link to the description to where the kidnapping aspect of this was debunked, and the anonymity of the source brings into question whether this is actually a real event that occurred, and if so, did it occur in this particular fashion, and even still whether or not this has any bearance at all on Paul's current disposition as a man of faith is essentially a side issue that I'm not going to get into at this point. But to get everything down to brass tacks here, if you've been following this guy and if you're recently a bit disillusioned by him, don't be, because there's something going on here that doesn't strike me as being entirely kosher, to use a Judaizing term. In my personal opinion, this guy is probably a Jesuit plant. And if not a Jesuit plant, he has definitely been influenced enough by renegade Jesuit teachings that he's adopted a good amount of their views on Scripture and on church government to basically make him interchangeable with them, at least underneath the surface, although outwardly he appears to be a traditional Seventh-day Adventist with a slightly Romish view of church history. But nonetheless, if you come across this guy's channel, just keep moving. Just ignore him. He's essentially an attention seeker, and he's using controversy in order to draw people into his ministry. He's a cult leader, probably with more diabolical intentions behind the masquerade of being a fanatical servant of God. So just be on the lookout. With prudence to myself and benevolence to all of you, good evening.